The Print off the Cuff, presented by IIFL Wealth and Asset Management, Corporate Partner AU Small Finance Bank, Airline Partner SpiceJet.
Welcome to The Print off the Cuff. I'm Manasi, Phadke, Senior Associate Editor with The Print. I have with me my Editor-in-Chief, Shekhar, Gupta, and we have Mr. Mahesh Vyas, who is the CEO and Director of the Center for Monitoring Indian Economy. Mr. Vyas has been with CMIE for more than 4 decades and at its helm for 25 years. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Mahesh, thank you very much for finding time for us non-specialists. Just explain to us non-specialists, what does CMIE do and how do you monitor something called Indian economy, and that too from Mumbai, because Indian economy is run from Delhi, business is run from Bombay, or maybe monetary policy.
Well, to a large extent, we do monitor business as well. A large part of our monitoring is of the business economy, and that's largely in Bombay. So the companies, the stock exchanges, is a fairly vibrant part of the Indian economy, and that becomes a large part of our monitoring. But we do monitor the economy at large, and our monitoring has evolved over time. So it began by collating the data published by government agencies and by, say, stock exchanges or by industry associations. That's where we began. So track them, present them in a meaningful form, make some sense of them, and deliver it to our clients. That's what we began with. But over time, there was a need for us to move into collecting more data that was not collected by the government. So we started our own database creation, like the Prowess database that tracks individual companies. Is the largest database in India on the performance of companies. And then we recently started the household survey, Consumer Pyramids Household Survey, that tells us what's happening to households. So you take now today a combination of data released by the government, by other similar agencies, data collected by us, weave it all together, deliver it to our clients, make sense of it, write on it, and tell the world what's happening in India. That's what we do.
So out of all that's happening in India that you see now, what sits on the top of your head right now? What's the top of your mind? Employment. Employment or unemployment?
I think employment is more important. The concept of unemployment is too narrow and does not address the real issue of India. Because the definition of unemployed is a person who's willing to work,
right,
is looking for work and still not able to get job. But there are lots of people who have given up looking for work and have even given up being willing to work. They're just saying that there are no jobs, so there's no point in looking at jobs, and therefore the unemployed number shrinks because these are people who are not looking for jobs.
So they've dropped out of the job market.
Correct. So what's important is to see how many people are employed. Is that number growing or not? Is that number as a proportion of the total working age population large enough or not? So I think the most important thing is employment. One more reason, what is the quality of jobs? Maybe everybody is employed, but they're all pushing a cart somewhere. Not a fair thing to do. So I think it's important to look at employment.
Yeah. When you say people who've dropped out of, who've even stopped competing for jobs, hopeless hai, what are the numbers ballpark today? And how are they different from some point in the past?
So let's look at a number which is in the jargon of labor economics. It's called the labor force participation rate. What proportion of working age population is willing to work, is looking for work? That proportion today stands at 40%. Okay? That means 60% of the working age population is not even trying to work. They're not even looking for work. That's a very low number by international standards. And I'll do a comparison in a bit, but we started compiling data on employment in 2016. And at that point, that number was 46%. That dropped to 43% by 2019-20, just before the pandemic. And then it's dropped to 40%.
That means fewer and fewer people are looking for jobs.
That's right.
And on a base of India working age population, what is it 1% drop? How many people?
So you have 1 billion people. So you
in
have
working age.
Yeah. So you have 10 billion people dropping off.
10 million people.
10 billion people.
For 1%.
For 1%.
So 6% since 2016 means 6 crore people dropping off.
Have dropped off.
Have dropped off.
That's right.
How good is the quality of data in the public sector on employment, and generally the quality of data in the public sector in India?
So when it comes to employment, the government conducts what is called as the periodic labor force survey. I think it's a good survey. It covers the employment segment fairly well, quite well actually, and is a very useful survey. I'll say it's a pretty good survey. The limitation is it's not fast frequency enough, and therefore its numbers come a little delayed. For example, the latest PLFS annual survey is for the year 2019-20. We are in 22 today.
And the situation has completely changed.
And the situation is very different.
Yeah, exactly.
They do an urban survey every quarter, but their rural survey is only for the year. So you don't get a picture fast enough. Whereas the CMI survey, you know the numbers of last week. So we are faster, but the PLFS survey for what it does is quite good. Now, the government did not conduct such a survey for a long time, so it is good that they started the PLFS survey, and it's a good survey.
And by and large, you've been coming out with data on jobs for a very long time now. By and large, in what direction are we moving? What large trends do you see?
So we began monitoring the employment situation in India from 2016. What I've seen is that the absolute employment numbers have come down. So we were employing about 416, I think, or 416 million people in 2016-17. That number came down to 409 million.
Although the population has grown up and employable people have gone up.
That's right.
Right. Birth rates are falling.
That's right. So although the population of employable people has gone up, the employment numbers have come down. Let me correct myself. It is 413 in 2016-17, went down to 409 in 1920, and now is down to 402 million. So that's a pretty sharp fall.
So from 41.9, you said?
41.3.
41.3 crores to 40.9 crores to now 40.2 crores.
Yes, 40.2 crores.
While obviously both people are being added.
That's right.
And these are people we see when we go to small towns, villages, who are hanging around chai shops, etc. all day, near playgrounds, not playing anything or with anything except with their phones. So they are consuming free data and whiling away their time.
That is right. The unemployed people, employable unemployed people, are oftentimes studying to get into some competitive examination. Like, for example, they are trying to get into the government. So they are unemployed. They are saying we are looking for a job but not getting it. Therefore, we're going back into preparing for some competitive exam. They're also hanging around just downloading data.
So you get a sense of relevance.
That's right. And there are women who you don't see out in the streets. Right. Who would be, if the economy was doing much better, if we were growing in a fashion to generate more employment, these women should be in the labor markets. They're sitting at home. So that's the
Have women dropped out of the workforce? I mean, the number of people seeking employment have clearly dropped from the data that you just shared with us. What are the demographics of those who have dropped out of the labor market?
This is the most worrying part. I said that the employment has fallen from 413 million down to now 402 million. Employment amongst men has increased a wee bit. All the fall is of women.
All the fall is of
women.
Women.
Why is that so?
So women have been dropping out big time from employment. So I think that's what is the most worrying part in India, that we are just not seeing women come to the labor market and they're getting out.
It's not happening in the print newsroom, I guarantee that.
It's not
to you.
happening in CMI either. I'm happy to note we employ a lot of people, a lot of women.
Yes. So what is the consequence of it? And give us some numbers again, because numbers make sense to non-specialists like us when there is a point of comparison.
So I'll give you an idea. The problem that we should be very concerned about is about the very adverse conditions under which women work. What are they facing? So we spoke about the labor force participation rate, which has fallen to 40%. So let's break that up by gender. The labor force participation rate for men is around 67, 68%. It used to be 70%, down to 67, 68%. What does that means? Of all the men in the working age group, nearly 70% of them are coming out to work. 30% are not, because they could be old, they could be too young, they could be all those kinds of things. But 70% of them are there. What's the number for women? 9%. That's dreadful. Now, that's not the complete story of how bad it is. The 70% men who come out to work, you find only around 7% of them not getting job.
I see.
Okay? Their unemployment rate is around 7%, or a little less than 7%, 6.8% or so. What's the unemployment rate for women? 14%.
Out of a base of only 9%.
Yes. So although very few women come out to work, they face a much steeper unemployment rate. That means, although they come out to work, they're not getting jobs. So the job market for them is essentially adverse. Not in the print, not in CMI, but it's
somewhere,
7 and
surely.
14, at least that much mental math I can safely do. That means unemployment rate for women who come out to work is twice as much as for men.
Yes, that's right. It's quite a bad situation for women. Now what happens is, because the women who go out to work find it so difficult to find jobs, it dissuades the remaining from even coming into work. Now I'll give you one more thing. Sorry, I'm just...
No.
These numbers are generated by CMI by our methodology, by our definition, which is a lot more stringent on considering a person to be employed or in the labor market, compared to what the ILO recommends and what the government statistics tell you. So, according to the ILO and what the government statistics do, therefore, is that if a person is employed for even 1 hour, in the last 7 days, the person is called employed for the entire period, so to say.
Just like me.
No. So, according to CMI, a person should be employed for a better part of the day of the survey. So you can't be only employed for 1 hour in 7 days. So as a result, the government statistics show a little more employment, a little more labor force participation rate. And this happens mostly for women. The difference happens in women. Many women work part-time, work a very little amount of the time, and they classify them as employed, we don't. As a result, according to official statistics, labor force participation rate of women is around 24%, 25% or so. We say 9%. Now, I said this long thing for one important thing. The labor force participation rate, according to government statistics, is falling.
Okay.
And it is lower than it is in other countries in the neighborhood as well.
So that is the question.
Bangladesh has 35%.
Yeah, so that's the question Nikhil Rampal, who's our young colleague and our data journalist, he's asked exactly. Women account for nearly half of India's population, yet their participation in remunerative work or paid work, according to World Bank statistics, is lower than our neighbors, Pakistan and Bangladesh.
That's right.
So what's it in Bangladesh now?
33 or 35%,
And
thereabouts.
what's government's data now for women?
25%.
25%. And Pakistan?
Pakistan has a lower number than Bangladesh. I know the total overall labor force participation is 50% there, so women could be a little lower than that, but I don't remember the Pakistan number.
But that's also higher than India. That's
Higher
what
than
the World
India,
Bank
yes,
said.
yes. So that's the problem. You know, neighboring countries, similar culture, similar situation, but still we have a much lower labor force participation.
Broadly, what are the problems? I mean, did the pandemic have a role to play in this? Was there some shift in culture? What can we?
So you know, that's a question which researchers try to find out. My contribution is to make the estimations. I can say what and how much. Why is a much more difficult question, far beyond my capabilities. So I leave it to the academics to find this out. Having put that asterisk mark, I'll still say that what I have learned, the little from the literature and the data we have, is that A, there's a supply constraint in the sense that women are discriminated against in being given jobs. Like I said, if their labor force participation it is so low, why is then their unemployment rate so high? Obviously, this is a supply constraint. Add to this the fact that India produces equal number, actually a little higher, number of graduate women compared to graduate men. So it's not education that women are lacking in anymore. So it's only adverse labor market conditions for them that's causing this problem. There are problems like the infrastructure is not good. A man can, so to say, easily travel to the next town and come late in the evening in infrastructure that may not be so good. The street lights are not good. The transportation is not good. It dissuades women from traveling too far from their home. So the conditions are not conducive.
Toilets in the workplace.
Many more things. You know, besides the fact that there can be some uncertainty regarding where you're working, it's the transportation, it's the facilities. Many things go against the women.
Is there a north, south, east, west sort of difference in this, differential?
There is. Women in southern India are more participative in the labor markets than they are in North India, but there's a difference. You see, if a state or a region is very poor, then it has more women participating, because when you have very high poverty, when the poverty is very severe, that household cannot afford not to be employed. So you will have a larger participation over there. Women will be doing whatever it takes to get their households running. So income plays a role, and North-South also plays a role.
Manasi?
Let's talk about the startup culture, that, you know, there was a boom and a lot of people got employed, people left existing jobs, got stellar salaries, and now, you know, for the last few months we are seeing a round of massive layoffs among startups as well. So how do you see that story going forward?
So, you know, this is one of those things that is causing more damage to hopes than to actual jobs. So the startups did create better quality jobs, did provide jobs that many people aspire to, and that is getting demolished. The total number of jobs that the startups created, at least the recent one, wasn't very big. So the problem is that that is now drying up, the few avenues we had, and it is dashing hopes. So the middle class hope of getting a fancy job is getting compromised. But I don't think the startups, excepting for those which were into the delivery boys kind of thing, retail trade market, where the employment was large, otherwise their employment quantum was not very big.
So there are people, lots of people have sent questions. So there is Deepak Endle from HUL. This is not about jobs. He says, although indirectly it's about jobs, the SME sector was most heavily impacted in COVID wave 1 and 2. And their business models got disrupted. What is the status of recovery in the SME sector? Have businesses that were forced to wind up restarted?
I think the SME sectors took a very big hit, and the employment in that has not recovered. The larger companies have grown much better.
In fact, they become more profitable.
They become more profitable. They are also employing more people. So the larger companies have taken away the market share of the largely demolished small and medium scale enterprises. And the small and medium scale enterprises were larger employers in numbers. So the hit is larger over there. I think what is important for us is to recognize one thing, that as policy or strategy, employment should be provided largely by the larger, more efficient companies. This giving too much protection to medium and small scale enterprises cannot last forever, because they are inefficient users of capital and inefficient users of labor. So we have
Inefficient
to
users of energy also.
of energy as well. So they are inefficient. So we require to move resources away from MSMEs to large companies. So that transition needs to happen, but without these economic shocks.
But then the government would say, we try to achieve exactly that through demonetization, because chota companies use cash.
I do not know what the stated objective, how the stated objective of demonetization shifted over time. I thought it was to eradicate black income, then it became cashless, then it became for reforming small and medium to large. So I do not know about that.
I have a very straight face, yes.
So yes, with a very straight face, but we have contortions on our face to understand that. But nevertheless, I think we require to have a stated strategic move towards creating employment which is of good quality, which can only be given by large enterprises. What do people of middle class urban areas aspire for? Getting a job in TCS, in Infosys, in Tata Motors, in Hindustan Unilever. That's what people aspire for. We cannot say go and work in a small workshop in your small little town outside there, where you have the risk of low facilities, low wages, and so on and so forth.
But then you have the situation, particularly in the Hindi heartland, where if you announce vacancies for 300 peons, God knows how many, 3 lakh, 1.5 lakh people apply. So these are not good quality jobs.
It is the government jobs are perceived, even if it is a peon's job, is perceived to be a good quality job because it assures you a lifetime employment situation, it assures you pension, and that's what people look for. It's also, in many ways, in some of the jobs, also a rent-seeking job. So if you get a job which allows you rent-seeking, gives you pension, gives you assured income for the rest of your life, it is obviously a job that you'll aspire for. So you say there are 300 vacancies, you will have 3 lakh applicants for it. And that's also because, the private sector is not giving you opportunities.
So that's the question that YP Rajesh, our managing editor, who knows something about economics that I don't know, which I know nothing about. He says, how can India move millions from agriculture to productive farm jobs like China did? Is manufacturing the hope? Is there a future for manufacturing in India, or have we missed that bus?
Well, it looks like we have missed the bus, but it's not that the opportunities have entirely gone away. We require to recalibrate the opportunities in manufacturing because we still have raw material advantage. India has the raw material advantage compared to many other countries in the world. We have raw materials, we have labor. There's no dearth of capital today. And there's no dearth of enterprise as well. So what's required is to scale this up and not do piecemeal small little things, but to imagine something much, much bigger. Now, if enterprise gets diverted into only infrastructure where you have assured returns, then enterprise for risk-taking investments into manufacturing for global markets will be absent. I think India requires to revisit its opportunities in manufacturing in a really big way.
So one can argue that the whole Make in India concept and the push that is being given under it is an attempt to do just that. But do you think we are going in the right direction?
With PLI, on PLI in particular, what's your view?
So, We have the Make in India, we have the PLI, and we can learn from this. We can even learn from the earlier tax rebates given for manufacturing investments. We have given some tax rebates recently as well. All we can say from them is that it's not adequate.
Not adequate.
Not adequate. Now, it's also not necessarily the right thing. So Make in India did not offer anything to industry. PLI is like subsidizing production. You give subsidy for a person to produce some goods. Not sustainable. You want that production to go up and employment to go up, you have to give more subsidy. So not sustainable. We require something smarter than that. Now, what is smarter than that? I think we need to learn a lesson from 91, 92. That spurred a maddening race towards creating capacities in India. And that is what brought lots of people out of agriculture into manufacturing. And tons of labor became more productive. Millions of people. And that was a great movement. So it is a debate of employment in those days, in the late 1990s, is that in spite of liberalization, we haven't seen an increase in employment, or very little. So jobless growth, we used to say. But within that jobless growth was a movement from agriculture into industry. So something good happened.
So there were still jobs. Earlier they might have been agricultural employment.
Yes.
Now they become
Industrial laborers.
salary-paying industrial employment.
And their productivity went up from very low productivity in farmlands to industrial workers. We require to do the same thing. What's happening in the recent times is people are moving from factories back to farms because factories are not giving you jobs. So we require to strategize to again build large factories.
And PLI, this productivity linked incentive?
Yeah, but you know, that's subsidy based. 91, 92 was not subsidy based. So we require to create an environment where people will feel that we require to just meet this great Indian consumer classes with large factories.
So if India were to create 91, 92, 2, a sequel, what would Mahesh Vyas do?
I'm not a policy maker, but I'll certainly say that as government, one needs to make the environment, economic environment, more conducive to mad investments. So don't call a company that took a loan from a bank and then became a non-performing asset as a thief. Non-performing assets are a part of business. It happens. There can be frauds. So we should ensure that we don't stigmatize, as I think it was earlier called, stigmatization of capital is not a good strategy. Taking fear out of bankers, taking fear out of entrepreneurs, having a stable policy where people can prosper in a competitive environment, reduce import tariffs, increase competition, let capital flow.
So basically do more of what you had done 2 years back.
Yes. What you had done in 2 decades ago, do more of that.
Manasi?
You know, in the absence of updated public data on employment, and when an organization like CMIE comes up with such worrying figures, we have seen that there are also attempts to discredit any data that's pointing towards something negative. How do you deal with the flack?
So I need to first say that they are not trying to discredit me. I need to first say that they probably have a point to say that there's something wrong in what we are doing. So the first thing to do is to check your own data, to check what's wrong with you. And I think, this is like free consultancy. My critics say, this is what is wrong with you. I go and check. If something is wrong, I fix it. If it's not wrong, I can go and tell the world that they are wrong, I'm right. So it brings credibility. So for a long time, for example, we had this difficulty in some economists or some government spokesperson would say our numbers are not reliable. Then came came this pandemic and the lockdown. And we said that unemployment rate, which was around 6% or thereabouts then, shot up to 24%. And all the critics were saying, are you sure about it? And in a month's time, or maybe a little more, 6 weeks or so, it came back to around 7%. And that's when we won our credibility. That we saw it spike and we saw it come down. So we're not merely, dramatizing, look, now all hell has broken loose, gone to 24%, we'll never come back, this is going to be, all crazy things are going to happen. But we could see the spike and see it come down, and we won the credibility. And I actually got a call from a government economist who said, you won your credibility by seeing the number come down again. There you go. So I think critics are very necessary, very important. They may be motivated, but I wouldn't like to see it that way.
So have you often got a pushback from the government, under this government or the previous governments?
No government has put in a call to me.
Has put
in a call to me.
Right.
I haven't got a call from any government official. I haven't got any call from the PMO saying, hey, what are you doing? You need to be careful. So I think it's quite possible to win your credibility, even if the truth is not,
palatable to all.
Yeah,
palatable
I think it's
all.
possible to do it. Let's give them credit for that. I mean, I haven't faced problems.
Well, I suppose they don't have any other data, so this is useful data.
Yeah, they have created their own databases also. And now we say that you have got two estimates of female labor force participation rate with two different definitions. Choose what you like.
Yeah. So one of them is yours. And you explained to us why governments would show a higher rate because of the definition. Your definition is different. Now, there is Srinjay Bhattacharya, who is a lawyer, Khaitan and Company. How is CMIE working towards increasing acceptance in government circles?
I do nothing to specifically win the government to believe what I am saying. I put the numbers out. There are many government ministries and other agencies that subscribe to our databases, use our databases. So I think we are quite okay with that. Some don't. Some use it and criticize it. It's all fine. I don't do anything specially to go to the government and say, hey, we are good. So I think it's okay.
So, Sukriti Vats, who's one of my young colleagues, how effective, how good will Agnipath be? You have a view on Agnipath?
How good will it be? For whom?
Okay. How is it a good idea? And if so, how good? If it's not a good idea, then why not so good?
So, if it is a strategy to change the share of labor and machines in the armed forces, I'm not the right person to answer this question.
Well, definitely numbers will be reduced, and it's true that all major armies in the world are reducing their numbers.
Yeah. So it's for the armed forces to tell us that. I believe that they may have a case for reducing labor and increasing machines. I have a problem with Agnipath from the way it has been introduced. So for a long time, for the last 2-3 years or even more, youngsters have been preparing to enter the armed forces with a certain understanding of what that job is going to be. And this is a very desired job. People are aspiring for this. They were preparing for it. They were working hard for it. And when the time comes to actually go there, they say, hey, look, we're not taking you all. We're changing the rules of the game. That was not a good thing to do. So if the same thing were to be implemented in a little more gradual, in a clear manner, it wouldn't have broken the hearts and the aspirations of young people in India. So I think that's the damaging part, which I hope gets corrected. I mean, one generation or one batch of these people are very disheartened. It will be good if something is done to make them feel combative in life again, not combative on the front, but combative in life again.
Yeah. And suppose that is done, do you see a scheme like this working, a four-year tour of duty?
I'm not really equipped to answer that question adequately. So what will happen to a person who is trained for 4 years and then comes into public life? I have a sense, I have a feeling, this is tentative, is that the person still has an advantage a comparable advantage, a competitive advantage
In the
the
job
job
market.
market. Because he is, I assume they're mostly males, but they could be women as well, are well trained in a certain skill set for which there is a job, for which there is a market. Decent, good quality jobs. If that's the case, those guys are going to be at an advantage. So I don't see a problem from that point of view.
Because two things will happen. One, the size of overall, actually three things will happen. The overall size of the forces will come down, particularly the army. Number two, the average age will come down because these guys will join and leave in 4 years, so they'll remain young. And third thing is obviously the pension bill.
That's right. So from a public finance problem, I think there's a larger problem over there, Shekhar.
What's that?
The problem is that the government has got lots of vacancies. By some estimates, 1 crore vacancies. Central government, state government, quasi-government, public sector enterprises, put them all together, it's 1 crore vacancies. And they're unable to fill it because they can't afford the pensions. They can afford the salaries now. They've even budgeted for it, but they can't afford the pensions afterwards.
Yes.
But we find the government lacking in providing us services. I don't have enough armed forces. I don't have, not armed forces, but policemen on the street. I don't have enough judiciary. I don't have enough people who
I
are
don't
giving
have enough diplomats.
enough diplomats.
We have
Okay.
as many diplomats as the state of Singapore.
Okay, there you go. But we can't hire them because our public finances are broken. So we require a major rethinking and strategizing on how will our public finances work to ensure government gives us the services they need to give us. They're required to give us judicial services, they're required to give us many more services, but they can't hire them. So this is not a good situation at all.
So would you say the government of India is a human resources disaster?
It's a disaster. It is a big disaster. And this is not now, it's been in the making for many years. So I think the government requires to pay attention to this and find a long-term strategic solution. The one that they have tried is, not exactly working out. People are going back to the old pension schemes, which can be a problem.
Congress states have done it.
That's right.
And what do you think of that?
I'm not a public finance expert, but prima facie, it doesn't look like a good idea at all.
Yeah, because nobody can stop a bad idea whose time has come. So I'm waiting for other states to
That's right.
pick up the virus.
Yeah. So we require to rethink this problem and require big reforms on government expenditure, public finance at large, hiring by the government, and the government providing us services back. Finally, we require the government to give us services. We paying taxes and not getting services is a bad scheme.
So would you mind sharing the data research methodology with our audience a little bit?
On employment or
On employment in
unemployment.
particular.
So I should say, what is the method by which we conduct our survey? So our survey is called the Consumer Pyramids Household Survey, CPHS, which collects data on employment and a lot more. So it is the largest household survey in India. The NSSO has a sample size of about 100,000 households. Our sample size is 178,000 households, much bigger. Okay. They conduct a survey once in a year, best case like PLFS. We conduct the entire survey thrice in a year. So very large. On employment, they have not been able to conduct their consumption expenditure survey since 2011-12. We collect that data every 4 months. So we collect data on income, expenses, employment, education, occupation, ownership of assets, and so on and so forth. So it's a pretty comprehensive survey. Now, we have a machinery on ground, which is our own, it's not outsourced to anyone, of a large field team who go house to house every day. We began the survey January 1, 2014. Since then till today, the survey has never stopped.
I see.
Excepting on one day, when the Prime Minister said, tomorrow we will have a curfew, nobody will go out of the house because of the pandemic. That day our people did not go out. But for the rest, we have always gone and collected data. Now, we collect this data through handheld devices, mobile phones, which is GPS enabled to ensure we get correct data. The data comes in the same day into our servers. We process this in the night, and 4 o'clock in the morning or thereabouts, our machines spew out the numbers. No one checks it because the checking is done at real time. So it's a very, very modern, very classy system of ensuring data comes in. Once Shekhar tells us that his income and expenses are X, and you as a supervisor have checked that the data is right, then the MD or CMI cannot change it. No statistician trying to do quality control can say this is too high or too low.
It is what it is.
It is what it is. And therefore, we automatically generate the numbers, and there's nobody looking over it to see what you have done. So it's a massive survey.
So there are questions on other issues also. Sanjay Agrawal, who is a banker, MD and CEO of AU Small Finance Bank. As per RBI, the further rate hikes seem inevitable. This may hit credit growth. How and what should be done by businesses to invest in capex and take advantage of the opportunity of being alternative to China in production?
Now, there are multiple questions over here. So there's an interest rate increase that's going to happen. And enterprises required to keep that in mind. I say that interest cost is not a concern for enterprises at all. They have deleveraged, their borrowings have come down, and their interest as a percent of sales, profits, whatever you see, is too minuscule.
That's the bigger companies.
Even medium, small companies.
What about an Adani, who has so much debt?
Well, you can't take one case and generalize on that. So
what's your view on Adani?
They have highly leveraged their activities. So they are expecting their business to boom. That's the justification for the high leverage. So enterprises, by and large, have deleveraged. But Adanis have leveraged in a big way. But for the economy as a whole, that's still not moving the needle in terms of total credit. Credit growth is still too small. So what does the interest rate hike mean?
It will further dampen credit growth.
It will, insofar as personal loans are concerned.
I see.
So people who are taking loans for vehicles or housing or consumer durables will be a little more reticent to do that, but enterprises don't care about it. Enterprises have other problems. They have large capacities which are underutilized, so they are not interested in expanding. They give you a piece of data. In the last 2 years of the pandemic, corporates have made massive profits, like they've never seen before.
Right.
We know of there are listed companies. I did the same study for unlisted companies. Even they have got record profits. So enterprises across the board have made massive profits. Now, year ended March 2022. The net fixed assets of listed companies grew by 2.4% compared to a year ago. It is extremely small.
Right.
2.4. So they're not investing. If they're not investing, they'll not borrow. So interest rates don't matter to them. So the answer to the question by a gentleman is that it doesn't matter. And we are unable to compete with China adequately. It's still too difficult for us.
So if we were to compete with China a little bit better than this, what are the 3 things you would say we
It's
should
not
do?
only China. If we were to grow our economy faster and spur it up, we require to invest a lot more. The investment environment.
See, there is a certain fatigue with China, particularly among Western companies, Japanese companies. And it's not just because of their geopolitical equations. It's also because Chinese themselves have become a lot more intrusive in foreign companies. They want the data on their IT infrastructure, for example. They ask them to list their cyber vulnerabilities, what that means. So there is a certain fatigue with China. We haven't seen much of that shift to India. So how can we get some of that to shift to India? Because it's going to Vietnam, Indonesia, the Philippines, countries like that.
I think the most important problem is a stable economic environment where we don't see the likelihood of disruptions happening too easily. In the last 5-6 years, we have seen 3 big disruptions to the economic environment. We had demonetization, we had GST implementation, which was a little messy, and then we had the pandemic. And the pandemic was a bit too complicated in India.
And went on too long also.
That's right. So I think that, and then if you have foreign companies running into trouble with tax authorities over here, with many industrialists in India running helter-skelter because they're stigmatized in one way or the other, that is an economic environment which is not conducive for people to invest in a big way. Unless you are few in industrial houses that feel they can deal with the situation.
Mansi, last question.
Yes. So just moving a little away from India, tell us a little bit about the Great Resignation and the Great Reshuffle phenomena in the US, and a corollary to that. Did we see that happening in India at all in any demography during
So I
or
read
post?
an article by Paul Krugman, I think, which explained this Great Resignation in America. It wasn't a great resignation finally. It was a great shuffling. So people were quitting jobs in one place, lying low for some time, and then moving to other places. So it wasn't really as much of a great resignation. There is some deal of high resignations. Many reasons for that, because the US economy gave a lot of support for people who were losing their jobs. And that motivated people to kind of take it a little easy. And people have reassessed their lives over there in a sense. I don't think we have those luxuries over here. So we require a lot more employment.
In fact, there were a lot of bad ideas floating at that point. Really eminent people had signed a joint letter, basically asking for confiscation of everybody's assets who was employed, who had some surpluses.
Okay. So I think in India, we don't have the Great Resignation story. We have Great Resignations, but that's because TCS is taking people from Infosys, is taking people from another IT company, and so on and so forth. So that was going on.
Before I let you go, unemployment. What is the unemployment, say, among now degree-holding engineers? Is that worse? Is that less worse?
It's high.
It's high.
It's higher than it is for non-degree holding engineers.
And is it higher than it was 5 years ago?
Yes, it is higher.
It is higher.
It's getting worse.
It's getting worse. And MBAs?
I don't have a number for that. I don't have a sense of that also. All I can tell you is that people in their 20s, 20 to 24, are the ones who are suffering the most. Their labor participation rate has fallen and their unemployment has gone up.
You have some numbers, that 20 to 24 age group?
So their labor force participation rate has fallen from 43% to 35%.
35%. That's 8 percentage points, or as
Sharp
they say
fall.
in financial markets, 800 basis points.
800 basis points.
Right.
And their unemployment rate has gone up something similar, 800 basis points. It's gone up. So they have taken a double whammy, low labor participation rate, high unemployment rate.
These are people born between 1998 and 2002.
Yes, yes. So they have taken the biggest hit.
Yeah. And do you worry about that in terms of social cohesion?
I worry a lot about that because they have faced the biggest uncertainties in their career. So many of them, for example, let's say you graduated in the summer of 2020 and there was the pandemic and there were no jobs and there was nothing, and then the second pandemic came in and again no jobs next year. You come to 2022, you're looking for a job with two other cohorts, the ones who graduated in 21 and 22. It's a terrible situation.
So competition becomes much worse for fewer jobs.
For fewer jobs. So I really worry about them. What's their mental state? So it's not only about loss of income, but it's also about the uncertainties that they are facing. People may have taken loans for education. Their repayments are going to be a problem. So it's a lot more than just their jobs and income. It's their mental state, which is worrisome.
Manasi, the last word from you.
No, I think we'll end on that note. Thank you so much. The numbers that you shared were very alarming, especially with regards to women in the workforce, and all of us need some introspection and correction to do about it. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Manasi Phadke, Senior Associate Editor with ThePrint, with my editor, Shekhar Gupta, and Mr. Mahesh Vyas. Thank you.
And Mahesh, you know what? I don't understand economics or even numbers, but I have some understanding of politics. And I look at all your numbers through a political lens or a political prism. And I see what this can lead in terms of political consequences, and they don't look pretty to me. So keep showing us the mirror. even if you don't like the way we look.
I know, it's very worrisome. I really worry about the youngsters. What's happening to them? And how are they dealing with this uncertainty? When will I get a job? When will I get my career
Just
going?
the loss of self-esteem. Yes. So I think that's worth looking out for. So I hope situation changes.
The problem, Shekhar, is, the unemployment rate and the unemployed is not a politically moving factor.
Not yet.
It'll take a long time.
Not yet. But see, if you ask me, who are the people who are burning trains and buses over Agnipath? Who are the people blockading Delhi over farm laws? Who are the people going and chopping somebody's throats off?
They're all unemployed.
They are all unemployed young
That's true.
people. So it then shows up in many different ways.
I know, if you don't recognize this can become really a disaster, big disaster.
That's why data is important.
It's important.
Thank you, Mahesh.
Thank you, Shekhar.
Thank you.
The Print off the Cuff, presented by IIFL Wealth and Asset Management, corporate partner AU Small Finance Bank, airline partner SpiceJet.